If this was truly about religion, why are the richest mineral belts always the first to burn? Why do the wars erupt not in the most divided places, but in the most valuable ones, where lithium lies beneath the rock? Where gold flows just beneath the feet, where rare earth metals hide in plain sight. They told us Africa was dying of its own divisions. They forgot to mention who handed out the knives. For decades, they spoke of civil war, of jihad, of failed states. But somehow, the blood always soaked the same soil, strategic soil. Soil with export value. Soil that made foreign generals whisper and foreign investors move. Now the smoke rises again. But something has changed. This time, the eyes watching are not only from satellites. They are from the Sahel. And they are waking up. In late October, the president of Chad ordered a full military blockade along the northeastern border with Nigeria. The reason, according to official intelligence, was fear, not of Nigeria, but of what might spill from it, Boko Haram. ISWAP fighters, armed bandits, and possibly something worse. Reports suggested that a foreign power, perhaps the United States, was planning a sweeping military strike. A strike not against a nation, but against a narrative. A justification. And just like that, the fire was reignited. But this time, Chad said no. So the question remains, who is really pulling the strings? And what are they trying so hard to bury? There is a place in Mali few had heard of until the earth beneath it started humming. A red dirt town called Buguni. Not famous for history, or for tragedy, until recently. Because in Buguni, they found lithium. Lots of it. Enough to wake the world. You will not find Buguni trending on international news. But behind every phone in your hand, every electric car on the road, every drone in the sky, there lies a mineral mined in silence. And Mali, poor, landlocked, punished Mali, happens to be sitting on one of the richest reserves of it. So the story changed. First, the headlines began whispering, instability. Extremism. Jihad. The JNIM was moving, they said. Insurgents were closing in. The Malian army responded, yes, but so did foreign interest. Intelligence requests. Coordination. Offers to help stabilize. But the locals weren't fooled. They had seen this playbook before. Because Buguni was not always contested. Not until the soil's value rose. Not until farmers became the first defense line for their country's future. They knew what was coming. And they prepared. Malian forces clashed with JNIM fighters in that very region. The news barely reported it. But what they didn't say spoke louder than what they did. Because right after that, the pressure mounted, reports of terrorist threats surrounding the lithium site. Accusations of foreign operatives spotted near the border. Then came whispers from Washington, it was time to intervene. But Mali stood its ground. And that's where the game got messy. There is a reason why some battles are never televised. Because when the lie collapses, the silence must hold the truth. They said Buguni needed saving. What it needed was sovereignty. Western powers, they claimed, wanted to help fight terrorism. But terrorism was never the objective, it was the excuse. The real target was underground. The real war was for what powers the next century. Some call it green energy. Some call it the Fourth Industrial Revolution. But call it what it is, a new scramble for Africa. And Buguni is not alone. Across Mali, diamonds shimmer beneath blood-stained soil. Gold veins run through broken hillsides. Rare earths lie quietly in rocks yet to be named. And for every mineral, a plan exists. A map. A covert mission. A story, just waiting to justify boots on the ground. This is why Mali became a battleground, not of religion, but of relevance. They don't fear Malians. They fear a Mali that knows its worth. The empire is watching Lithium like a predator watches its prey. But what they did not expect was resistance. What they did not account for was dignity. When the Malian president visited the Buguni mine, it wasn't just a casual stop. It was a message: this is ours. And we will not trade chains for contracts. Even China, silent but calculating, has made moves. But unlike the old colonizers, China offers no crusades. Just cold business. That difference, too, is dangerous. Because it shifts the world. The United States knows this. We must catch up with China, one official said. Not in values. Not in cooperation. But in extraction. What they do not say out loud is louder than what they claim to support. They want Mali not as a partner, but as a quarry. A passive land of minerals and misery. A nation whose only role is to die for other people's energy. But Malians are done dying. They remember Libya. They remember Iraq. They remember how every intervention came dressed as salvation, and left dressed in smoke. If you are still watching, then you are part of the few who see through the smoke. And if you believe that Africa's resources belong to its people, not to the highest bidder, then this story is yours. Because the war for Buguni is not over. And the silence from the world only proves how powerful this truth must be. If you believe that Africa's truth is worth defending, leave your voice in the comments. Not as an echo, but as a stand. They thought Africa would never speak. That Mali would never stand. That Lithium would never fight back. They were wrong. Because for every lie they write, there is a generation now born to expose it. For every weapon they ship in, a people rises to defend their ground. For every drone that circles, there is a shovel striking deeper into sovereign soil. And deep within the red earth of Mali, the truth waits. It is not armed. It is not loud. But it endures. And that alone, is what terrifies them most. They called it a liberation. But for the people of Lake Chad, it felt more like a siege. When the soldiers came, they said they were chasing terrorists. But the bullets did not always land on fighters. Sometimes, they found families. Fishermen. Girls with books. Boys with empty pockets. This is the mask of Boko Haram. A name once whispered in fear. Then shouted in headlines. And now, used as a password to unlock foreign firepower. Back in 2014, when the world started watching Nigeria more closely, an uncomfortable truth emerged: someone was feeding the fire. While Boko Haram torched villages, ambushed convoys, and kidnapped schoolgirls, someone, somewhere, was rearming them. They did not just survive against Africa's largest army. They multiplied. They evolved. And somehow, they always had guns. That year, the Nigerian government under President Goodluck Jonathan tried to buy weapons abroad. The United States refused. An arms embargo was quietly enforced. No official announcement. Just closed doors. No sales. The message was clear: fight terror without the tools to win. Nigeria turned to the black market. Still, the insurgents brandished weapons newer than the ones government soldiers carried. How? In 2020, hope returned from an unexpected direction: Chad. Under President Idris Deby, the Chadian military launched a bold offensive across the Lake Chad basin. Boko Haram camps were destroyed. Weapons seized. Fighters scattered. Some fled into Nigerian territory. But then, the story took a turn. Instead of celebrating the victory, Nigeria told Chad to stop. The official statement: "You cannot operate here. We are a sovereign nation." Translation: let them go. That moment, captured in a quiet diplomatic exchange, was louder than any explosion. Chad had done what Nigeria would not. And for that, they were told to stand down. Idris Deby died a year later. under suspicious circumstances, in battle against insurgents. He died on the front lines, fighting a war Nigeria never truly committed to. And now, his son, Mahamat Idris Deby, faces the same crossroads. In late 2025, he ordered the full closure of the Chadian border with Nigeria. His reasoning? Intelligence reports warned that Boko Haram and ISWAP fighters were retreating, not from defeat, but from something worse. Because this time, it was not just insurgents on the move. Whispers spread that a foreign military intervention was imminent. That former President Donald Trump had made remarks about launching airstrikes. That special forces were already in motion. But the target wasn't clear. So Chad sealed the border. And for once, the world stayed quiet. What they don't want to admit is this: Boko Haram has become a tool. Not a threat. A lever to justify military presence. A narrative to keep the fire burning just enough to prevent peace. Because peace means no excuses. Peace means people asking the real questions. Like, who trained these fighters? Who funds their survival? Who decides which weapons cross which borders? The deeper truth is this: every prolonged war becomes profitable. Not for the dying, but for those who supply both sides. Some reports allege that organizations like USAID, under the guise of development, channeled resources that indirectly empowered extremist networks. Others speak of deep state operatives playing both ends, arming governments by day and rebels by night. This is not conspiracy. This is modern warfare. A war of proxies. A war of managed chaos. And Nigeria, once the giant of Africa, has become the perfect host for it. Every time Boko Haram strikes, the response is predictable: more aid, more surveillance, more cooperation. But never resolution. The people of Borno, Yobe, and Adamawa know this pattern too well. They bury their dead. Then watch helicopters fly overhead. Not to rescue, but to observe. Because ending the war was never the mission. Managing it was. Idris Deby saw through that. He knew that peace in the Sahel would never be gifted. It had to be taken. With grit. With sacrifice. With honesty. His son, Mahamat, now carries that burden. And by closing the border, he did more than block fighters. He blocked the lie. A lie that says Africa must remain broken to be helped. A lie that says chaos is organic, not engineered. A lie that paints invaders as saviors. But Chad remembers. And so should we. Because Boko Haram is not just a terrorist group. It is a mirror. It reflects the games played behind closed doors, the shadows cast by foreign interests. And the cost of refusing to kneel. It is the face they show the world when they want to strike. And the excuse they give when people start asking why. But ask anyway. Ask who profits from endless war. Ask why the most well-armed terrorists in Africa never run out of bullets. Ask what happened in 2014. Ask why peace is treated like a threat. Because once you ask, you cannot unsee. And if you believe that peace should not be postponed for profit, let your voice be heard. The mask is slipping. And beneath it, we see the real enemy, not the fighters, but the ones who keep them fighting. This is the cost of silence. And the beginning of truth. You won't find it on the evening news. Not on CNN. Not on BBC. Not on France 24. They talk about coups. They talk about jihadists. They talk about unrest. But what they never show is the moment a people decide they will no longer ask for permission to be free. Burkina Faso was supposed to be next. After Libya. After Mali. Another failed state in need of saving. Another headline. Another intervention. Then came Ibrahim Traore. A captain. A soldier. A man the West underestimated. They said he was too young, too radical, too defiant. But they forgot one thing: he spoke the language of his people. Not in French, but in fire. And the fire caught. When Traoré dissolved the French-funded electoral commission, they called him a dictator. When he kicked out foreign troops, they called him a threat. When he armed the volunteers for the defense of the homeland, they called it war. But the people called it something else: dignity. And suddenly, the narrative cracked. Because the images didn't match the headlines. Because the man they painted as a tyrant walked without fear among crowds. Because children painted his name on their hands, and grandmothers blessed him in marketplaces. So they changed tactics. Now the cameras zoom in only when there's blood. Now the microphones only turn on when there's fire. Now the articles focus on fear, not facts. Because the truth is too dangerous. The truth that Burkina Faso has become a symbol. The truth that Traoré did not seize power to enrich himself, but to protect a future. The truth that the West no longer controls the story. They censor not just what is said, but what is felt. They silence celebration. They blur flags. They downplay victories. When drones fall into African hands, they call it destabilization. When foreign bases close, they call it chaos. When sovereignty rises, they call it risk. But on the ground, the people know better. They know the feeling of fear turning into courage. They know what it means to defend soil with no air support, no permission, and no retreat. They know that Traoré is not perfect, but he is theirs. So now they target the mind. They say the revolution is a Russian plot. They say AES is a puppet alliance. They say Pan-Africanism is just propaganda. But propaganda does not bleed. Propaganda does not bury its dead. Propaganda does not face French drones with homemade rifles. The men and women of the Sahel do. They do it without applause. Without trending hashtags. Without billion-dollar budgets. And still, they rise. That is the truth they cannot afford to broadcast. So instead, they amplify rumors. They fuel division. They assassinate character. And when that fails, they assassinate people. The number of African leaders who died just before a shift in policy is not a coincidence. It is a pattern. From Thomas Sankara to Muammar Gaddafi, from Idris Deby to the whisper campaigns against Traoré, the message is clear: lead your people. And you become a target. But something has changed. Because this time, the people are watching. They are documenting. They are remembering. Every speech. Every threat. Every drone in the sky. And with every act of resistance, a new story is being written, not by foreign correspondents, but by farmers, students, mothers, and soldiers. A story they cannot control. A story where Africa is not the battleground, but the author. If you believe that story deserves to be heard, even when it is inconvenient, even when it is forbidden, leave a comment. Let them know their silence cannot erase our voice. Because truth, once spoken, becomes a flame. And flames, when shared, cannot be censored. It was never just about today. Not just about gold, or coups, or old colonial scores. The real war was always about tomorrow. Because whoever controls the minerals of Africa, controls the future. In dusty towns like Buguni and cobalt pits in Congo, the battle lines are drawn not just by generals, but by engineers. By AI labs. By drone manufacturers. By those building the nervous system of the 21st century. Lithium is not just for batteries. It is for dominance. Cobalt is not just for phones. It is for control. Rare earth metals are not just valuable. They are strategic weapons. Every algorithm that decides who lives or dies in modern warfare runs on a chip. Every chip needs minerals. And Africa has them. This is why the battles are endless. This is why the terror never ends. Because no empire will willingly lose access to the very soil that powers its supremacy. The scramble for Africa never stopped. It just changed its interface. Today, it wears the face of counterterrorism. Of peacekeeping. Of development. But behind the blue helmets and diplomatic smiles lies a cold equation. AI supremacy equals supply chain supremacy. And supply chains begin in African dirt. They tell you it's about democracy. They show you guns and rebels. But the real war room is built on spreadsheets. On tech patents. On satellite maps of mining corridors. And while you scroll, they are digging. While you pray, they are programming. While you vote, they are flying drones powered by lithium dug by children. The next global war will not start with missiles. It will start with supply chain disruptions. And whoever controls Africa's minerals controls who gets to launch, who gets to compute. Who gets to surveil. The West knows this. China knows this. Even Russia knows this. What they didn't expect was that Africa might learn it too. That young Africans might connect the dots. That a captain in Burkina Faso might understand that sovereignty means owning the ground beneath your feet, and the code running your skies. Because make no mistake. The drones of tomorrow will not just drop bombs. They will drop narratives. They will scan faces. They will decide who gets medicine, who gets targeted, who disappears. And they will be powered by African minerals. So the question is not just who rules Africa. It is who owns the future. And Africa is starting to say. Not you. Not anymore. Because the one thing more dangerous than an empire with AI, is a continent that understands its worth. And if Africa ever rises not just in protest, but in data, in infrastructure, in semiconductor labs, then the empire is finished. This is why they fear Burkina Faso. Why they fear Mali. Why they fear Niger. Not because of what we are. But because of what we could become. A sovereign continent with sovereign code. A place where the minds do not feed machines of conquest. But machines of healing. Where the future is not imported, but built. So the next time they say it's about terrorism, or governance, or religion, ask them this. What is really buried in our soil? And what are they so desperate to extract before we wake up? They always thought we would stay quiet. That we would mine their minerals, fight their wars, believe their headlines, and forget who we are. But something is shifting. In Ouagadougou. In Bamako, in Niamey, the wind feels different. It carries drums, not drones. Flags, not fear. Because a generation is rising that does not ask for freedom. It takes it. A generation that names its children after rebels. That learns history not from textbooks, but from scars. That does not flee the fire, but walks through it, together. And now the world must face what it tried to suppress. That Africa remembers. That Africa resists. That Africa writes back. No, this is not about one leader. Not about one country. This is about a spirit. A refusal. A return. To sovereignty. To dignity. To the knowledge that we are not poor, we are being plundered. We are not weak, we are being silenced. But not anymore. So to every watcher still listening. If your heart beats with the rhythm of freedom. If your soul hears the call of the Sahel. Then stand with us. Because this is not a documentary. This is not a headline. This is a movement. And movements are not watched. They are joined. Like. Comment. Subscribe. But more than that, remember. Speak. Share. Because truth needs 1,000 voices. And Africa is finding hers. Together, we are louder. And this time, we will not be silenced.